Right, I'm back with another Destiny 2 video. This is one I was going to make a couple days ago because it related to an article I wrote then, but kind of got pushed around, and I did want to come back to it still because we are still wrapping up the end of 2021 here, and this is about my arguments that 2021 was the best year of Destiny 2 so far. Maybe, I guess, the best year of Destiny period over the whole 7-year lifespan of it. Some people agreed with me, some people didn't. And I kind of wanted to talk about that and like why I think it kind of is, even though we did not get a major expansion this year. And also kind of wanted to highlight some of the pushback, maybe not just about this year specifically, but kind of this overall sentiment I've seen about like, you know, the good old days and things just aren't as good as X, Y, and Z and stuff like that. The way I'm not going to go into like super details like I did in the article, but like the way I kind of measure this is it's not enough to just have kind of, I guess, a good expansion in a given year. Like, yes, everyone loved the Taken King. Taken King was a good expansion, and yet, like, I think we have to, when we're thinking back to those days, this is before kind of the seasonal model, before ongoing content, and as much as, you know, people enjoyed certain aspects of that time with the game, there used to be just yawning gaps of time in between, you know, when the game is actually relevant again. The post Rise of Iron era, where everyone was like refarming the raids for the cool ornaments and things, like, again, that was a very good moment, and yet if we're kind of talking about overall years, that was preceded by like just kind of absolutely nothing for an extended period of time. Destiny 2 kind of moved more into the seasonal era after we did the whole DLC dance with Crystal Osiris and Warmind. And what, again, while I think Forsaken is a very good DLC or expansion in and of itself, start to finish, I think this year, 2021, has been kind of the best string of seasons ever. A lot of this is related to story. I think kind of having a connecting thread that started with Season of the Hunt, sort of tied into Beyond Light, and then extending all the way through what we have now with the kind of gradual build up and reveal of Osiris as Savathun, and the kind of ongoing theme of enemies becoming allies with Keitel, and kind of Saints' redemption among the fallen with Mithrax, and then of course Crow as a threaded narrative. Pretty much we've never seen a narrative quite like that. Before this, we had a connecting thread that was like, okay, the pyramids are coming, and like that was kind of it. That was like the connecting thread, whereas like a season would be like, oh, by the way, like the Almighty's about to crash into things this time around, and so that was like very not connected to kind of the ongoing events of a season. We also spent that whole season building up the Warmind, and then it just kind of was shut off like a light switch, and has never been seen again except in reprised Destiny Strikes. Before that, we had the I would think that this is probably the season or the year that is argued to be the best besides the one I'm saying, which is at least part of Season of the Forge. I think Season of the Forge technically started the previous year, but then Season of the Drifter, but then Season of Opulence, leading into Shadowkeep. And so that was a good string of content too. However, again, I think those were all very kind of disconnected from each other and very separate. Everyone likes to talk about the activities and the loot. And yet, I think an under kind of appreciated aspect of this year has also been the activities and the loot. And I keep seeing this narrative that like the chase just isn't there anymore. I'm not excited about loot and like this kind of thing. And like, I don't get that because when you kind of look at the facts on the ground here in terms of what the game offers compared to what it used to, I just don't see what people are the point people are trying to make here. And it just seems so purely kind of fueled by either just really heavy nostalgia for what used to be here, or maybe just burn out with just playing Destiny too long. Like, even if it is technically better now, people are just so burned out on kind of the concept of Destiny that they don't like it as much now. I'm going to pick on Chevy here, where he has, I love him, but he has the kind of the take that I'm pushing back against here, which he said as a reply to my original article that I kind of wanted to highlight. So this is my case for 2021 being Destiny 2's best year to date, and he said, from a story delivery and narrative perspective, I agree. From a loot, seasonal activity, incentive, reward structure, and general gameplay loot perspective, I say the exact opposite. Each season I personally play the game less and less, and the last year has been the worst. So someone pushes back to him and says, I disagree with the loot being bad, I think it's good. And then he says, all the loot is either D1 weapons, reprised weapons, or weapons that are juiced up by the artifact. Still nothing that is as exciting to me as finding spare rations, 7th/Aquilos SMG, guillotine, or heritage/succession. Okay, so I don't really agree with this because I think we have gotten both more loot, a wider quality of loot in terms of they have been constantly introducing new perks and stuff into the pool, and time and time again, like every season, even every half season, we got new stuff for the anniversary, and then the kind of different ways that we can chase things, the ways that we can farm activities, have all, I would argue, been significantly evolved. And one thing that Chevy doesn't mention specifically here, but I hear all the time is, the glory days were like Black Armory and those weapons, those were the best weapons, or opulence, like menagerie grinding, that was the best grind, that was the best the game has ever been. I don't see it. I think everyone is kind of blinded by the realities of how that used to be. I'm not saying those were not good weapons or those were not, fun to acquire at the time, but I think we have to look back and kind of remember the reality of that. Okay. Black Armory had a ridiculous kind of absurd multi-step grind where you had to see and talk to Ada about 4 different times, go and kill like 30 random enemies in a lost sector somewhere, and then grind for 1 drop of the weapon you're looking for. Obviously, there are kind of classic weapons, Kindled Orchid, Blast Furnace, Hammerhead was the best SMG forever, and yet kind of overall, I would argue that loot is not the most exciting. Blast Furnace felt really good. I have a lot of attachment to Blast Furnace like everyone had, and yet, what was the Blast Furnace role everyone wanted? Either some form of, I forget, I think you could get Outlaw, but it was like Feeding Frenzy Outlaw, Kill Clip Rampage, one of those. And then the exciting Kindled Orchid thing was the fact that it could roll Rampage and Kill Clip at the same time. That was the fun curated roll. And like, that's fine. But again, there was not much diversity there. And like the full spectrum of loot was not kind of amazing. Season of the Drifter, Chevy mentions grinding for spare rations. I think running Reckoner for Drifter weapons was one of the worst grinds in the history of the game, personally. There was, the instancing for that was a nightmare. The balancing for that activity was a nightmare. You could only use just very specific supers to spam, and it just didn't work. And it was just incredibly annoying. There was no guaranteed drops. There was no target farming. There was nothing. So, like, yes, I guess technically when that spare rations did drop and when the roll was right, it felt good, and yet everyone hated that. Like, that's the way that system worked. This changed dramatically in Opulence, which is when we got our first kind of real target farming thing, where you could pick the weapon, you could pick the masterwork, like you could do a whole lot of things. And I think Opulence kind of cheated because it got away with the glitch where you could farm like 7 or 8 weapons in a row because of the chest glitch that they did not patch for a very long time. So I think it's cheating a little bit, I'd say, to say that was the best farm, because it was just like glitched out to give you just an absurd amount of things. And I also think, again, there are some good weapons in there. I love Austringer. Everyone loved Beloved. I forget what the new Adored, Beloved. Which one's the new one? Is Beloved? I don't remember. Okay. I think Beloved is the old one. Yeah. So those were like, highlights there, but there were also just kind of a lot of duds that, is only really excited about like the new version of the multi-tool they made or whatever that SMG was called. Like, there weren't that many actual things to farm in Opulence. It was just kind of people farming the same maybe 3 weapons over and over again, trying to get the perfect roll. I agree, Opulence is a great activity in and of itself. I think it would not have been remembered as fondly if you went through an entire menagerie run and got like 1 weapon or maybe 2 weapons like you were supposed to. I think that would have put a hamper on how much enthusiasm there was for that. And then I compare it to now, where we kind of had a middle ground with, Arrivals had Umbral engrams. That was kind of the start of a different kind of target farming. I don't think there was anything terribly exciting about like getting a good falling guillotine. It was a cool weapon for sure. But this season, there's just been so many weapons dumped out. I would say both old and new. There are a ton of new weapons in the game right now that have come over the past year. Not every season was a home run. All of the Season of the Hunt weapons were not good, obviously. and then Season of the Hunt kind of was lacking in general. But we did get a lot of cool kind of story content there, which being for a bad season, I think that was, it still kind of outperformed expectations to a certain extent, at least in that category. Loot, though, I mean, we have a set of new seasonal guns every time. They are all coming with new perks every time. There are very focused ways to farm them almost all of the time. The focusing for Season of the Chosen wasn't great. Splicer is much easier. Lost, it's much easier. And now we're even like, target farming the dawning weapons that come with 4 perks and stuff and have gotten like new pools and things. And I think we have just really kind of gone a long way from the days of Outlaw Rampage, Outlaw Kill Clip, things like that, where there are just so many different types of weapons and roles to chase now that I think it's a lot more exciting. And everyone's like, oh, all these new perks are just the same thing, but like, no, they're not. There's a lot of pretty creative perks out there. And I don't buy the argument that, everything is kind of the same but worse, and everything is recycled, everything is reprisal, blah, blah, blah. Like, the one thing I would agree with is sunsetting was bad. Sunsetting should have never happened, and bringing back weapons that have been sunset has never really felt good. I do not have an issue with bringing back Destiny 1 weapons, per se. It has been 4 years since those existed. They existed in a completely different sandbox with completely different perks, completely different roles. Like, yeah, okay, like I get that the Matador 64 existed before, or Iasuna existed before, but like it does not strike me as like lazy that they are, continually bringing back Destiny 1 weapons, because it's not replacing Destiny 2 weapons. There are still tons and tons of new weapons that they come out with all the time. And like if you're saying something like, oh, they're just recycling Halo weapons now for the anniversary, like, nope, don't like that. Those are some of the most innovative, interesting weapons they have come up with in terms of like the design of blending Halo elements in a Destiny sandbox. Like that is, I think, one of their crowning achievements of this entire year is that slate of weapons. I think they did a tremendously good job with that, and I will push back on anyone that says that. I think build crafting has gotten much more interesting. The changes they made with mods over time has been a really kind of great system this year, where it's a lot easier to go for specific builds, whereas kind of back in the quotes, opulence, Black Armory Glory Days era, it was like, how can you just instantly get your super back with one of 4 or 5 different exotics? And those were like the main builds, or, around that, like, how can you just autofill your LMG with infinite ammo in this well? And like, I don't think that was a terribly good, especially PvE meta back in the day. I think Destiny kind of broke itself, and that was kind of around the time they had to nerf a whole bunch of things and kind of go back to the drawing board, because they realized they were designing entire activities around power creep, which is how we got Reckoning in the first place. I think the way to farm stuff has gotten way more evolved. We have, everyone always brings up skeleton keys and strikes, and you could get strike-specific loot for skeleton keys. I like skeleton keys too. I think those should be brought back to some extent. And yet, since in the last year or two, we've gotten entire lists of strikes, of Knife's Wall specific loot on a rotation. We have tons of playlist weapons that you get for grinding those playlists. We have farmable raids and dungeons to a certain extent, and we have seasonal activities that are farmable and highly targetable. And then when there are not targeted farms, the activities I think are still well designed enough to encourage grinding. Like Dares of Eternity, you can't target farm a battle rifle per se, and yet you're still getting a ton of loot to the point where like you're probably going to end up with the role you want, unless it's a Void Sword, and then you will not. But I think we have way more options for farming a lot of different good loot in the game, and it is not like kind of gated into one thing like the way it used to be. Like, way back, the best loot only came from kind of the highest tier raids, which would like exclude everybody. This season, what's one of the best weapons this season? Cartesian Coordinate, a world drop. And that's why I kind of like the idea of the artifact kind of being like, okay, fusion rifles are crazy this season, like go nuts. I like that. I like kind of the forcibly shifted meta where, you're not using the same Outlaw Rampage hand cannon every season, because you are using, you know, a different slate of weapons that have been buffed in various ways by the artifact. Sometimes there'll be permanent buffs if the sandbox changes. Sometimes it'll be temporary with the artifact. I personally like that system. I think it's more interesting. We can talk about things like champion mods, and like this whole season is auto rifle anti-barrier. Not great. But generally speaking, I think this system has done more harm than good. Sorry, more good than harm. And I don't really, every time I try and think about, you know, the quote glory days of Destiny 1 or the glory days of Destiny 2, which were 2 or 3 years ago, allegedly, I just don't see it. It's not that I haven't had fun with that content, you know, back when it was airing, but I think Destiny has evolved. I think it is 500% better in storytelling now, but I think it's twice as good in terms of loot and farming and interesting build choices and things like that too. I think it has gone way above and beyond those kind of old eras of the game. And while yes, sure, I would love to see Blast Furnace come back, or like I would love Menagerie to come back, and I'm still kind of mad that was sunsetted. Like I think that's I think sunsetting and content vaulting is kind of a separate issue than like the current state of what is offered and kind of the way you farm loot now and the type of loot that you can acquire in terms of the diversity of roles, the diversity of builds. And I don't think anything is compared to this year. The worst thing that happened this year was trying to get stasis in line for like 6 months. But besides that, I think this has been, story aside, I think this has been a great year for loot and builds and interesting gameplay and meaningful farming. So there's my very long Bungie shill thing here, but I have to give credit where it's due. I criticize the game all the time. Like, 3 out of every 4 articles I write is criticizing something. But I think they did a very, very good job this year on many levels, and that is without a huge expansion like Witch Queen. If we can get Witch Queen, and that's amazing, and then we have 3 more great seasons after that, maybe 2022 will be the best year of Destiny. I don't know. I might be playing it less, having a child, but, you know, we'll see how that goes. And I'm really looking forward to testing it out in whatever capacity I can. And I just think that the game is improving over time. I think it's been a joint partnership between kind of absorbing feedback of what players want, what players don't want, combined with kind of like technical necessities of the game, aka content vaulting and things like that aren't easy pills to swallow. But I think overall they have produced a really, really stellar year of ongoing live content in a way that almost no other games can match. Maybe you've got Genshin and Final Fantasy and like, you know, true MMOs or something that are doing something similar, but I think they've done an excellent job this year, and I have to give them kind of full credit where it's due. So anyway, that's my take. We'll see if this sparks any further debates, but yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.